Have you ever caught yourself saying something to yourself that you would never say to someone you love? Maybe you forgot something and immediately thought, why are you so stupid? You looked in the mirror and thought, nothing looks good on me anymore. You wanted to speak up in a meeting, but before anyone else had a chance to respond, your own mind already said, don't say anything. You're probably wrong. Or maybe someone asked what you wanted, and before you even answered them, you answered yourself. It doesn't matter. Just let everyone else decide. The interesting thing is, most of us don't even notice we're doing it. Those thoughts happen so fast that they feel like facts. They feel like our personality. They feel like common sense. But what if they aren't? What if the reason you're keeping yourself last isn't because you don't know better? It's because the voice you've been listening to the longest has convinced you that's exactly where you belong. And if that's true, changing your calendar won't fix it. Learning to say no won't completely fix it. Even knowing your needs won't fully fix it. Because every time you try, that voice is waiting to pull you right back to where you've always been. Today, I want to show you something that changed the way I think about personal growth forever. Because once you hear it, you'll probably never listen to your inner voice the same way again. If we've never met before, I'm Keisha Golder. I help women become the person that they were created to be so they can create lives that reflect who they are instead of who the world told them to be. On this channel, we're walking through the Life Purpose Makeover roadmap one step at a time. We're not trying to become someone completely different, but we're uncovering the woman who's been there all along. Last week, we talked about your needs and why they aren't inconveniences. Today, we're taking the next step because once you recognize your needs, you have to pay attention to the conversation happening inside your own head. And I honestly believe this is one of the most overlooked reasons women stay stuck for years. By the end of this video, I want you to be able to recognize three things. First, where your inner voice actually came from. Second, how that voice quietly keeps you putting yourself last without realizing it. And third, how to begin creating an inner conversation that actually supports the woman you're becoming instead of constantly reminding you of who you used to be. Because here's what I've learned: the longest conversation you'll ever have is the one you have with yourself. So let's make sure it's helping and not hurting. Here's something that I wish more women understood: not every thought you think belongs to you. I know that sounds strange, right? But stay with me for a minute. Think about a little girl growing up. She hears, don't make people feel uncomfortable. Good girls don't argue. Stop being so sensitive. Don't brag. Be grateful. Don't be selfish. Just keep the peace. At first, those are someone else's words. But after hearing them over and over again, something interesting happened. Eventually, she stops hearing someone else's voice and starts hearing her own, except it really isn't her own. It's years of messages that slowly became her internal narrator. That's why so many women believe they're simply being realistic when they're actually repeating beliefs they never consciously chose. Have you ever noticed how quickly your mind can talk you out of something? You think about applying for a new position. Someone else is more qualified. You think about taking a day for yourself. You haven't earned that yet. You think about setting a boundary. They're going to think you're selfish. Those don't arrive because they're true. They arrive because they've become familiar. And here's something fascinating: our brains naturally repeat familiar thought patterns because familiarity feels safe, even when those thoughts are hurting us. Your brain isn't trying to make you happy, it's trying to keep you predictable. And that's a big difference. Sometimes we stay inside painful patterns simply because they're familiar, not because they're healthy. And once you understand that, something powerful happens. You stop believing every thought just because you thought it. You become curious instead. You begin asking, where did that thought come from? Who taught me that? Is it actually true? Those questions create space. And that space is where transformation begins. Because once you start questioning the voice in your head, you begin noticing something even deeper. Some of the harshest things you believe about yourself were never your beliefs to begin with. And that's what we're going to unpack now. Your inner voice rarely sounds mean. It usually sounds responsible. It sounds practical. It sounds protective. It sounds like it's trying to keep you from making a mistake, right? That's why it's so easy to believe. It usually doesn't say you don't matter. Instead, it says now is not the time. It usually doesn't say your dreams aren't important. It says, let's make sure everyone else is okay first. It doesn't say you shouldn't rest. It says you've got too much to do today. See the difference? The message is soft, but the outcome is exactly the same. You stay alive. That's why I don't call it just negative self talk. I call it protective self talk because most of the time, your inner critic isn't trying to destroy you, it's trying to protect the version of you that learned survival years ago. Maybe keeping everyone happy kept peace in your home. Maybe staying quiet helped you avoid conflict. Maybe working harder earned approval. Maybe never asking for anything made you feel accepted. Those strategies may have protected you once, but here's the question. Are they still protecting you? Or are they preventing you from becoming the woman you're trying to become? That's a very different question because what helped you survive one season of your life may be hurting you. Imagine we're sitting in a coffee shop together. You just finished telling me everything you've been thinking lately. You tell me I'm failing, I'm behind, I should have my life together by now. Everyone else seems to know what they're doing except me. Then I ask you one simple question. Who first taught you that? Most people pause, not because they don't know, but because they never asked themselves before. Sometimes it's a parent, sometimes it's a teacher, sometimes it's an old relationship, sometimes it's society, sometimes it's years of comparing yourself to everyone else online, and sometimes it's years of repeating the same sentence until it feels like the truth. Friend, not every voice you've carried deserves to keep leading your life. That realization isn't about blaming anyone. It's about giving yourself permission to decide which voice deserves a seat at the table. Because if you never question them, you keep living by rules you never intentionally chose. It's simply the loudest voice you've heard the longest. Think about that for a second. The sentence you repeat every morning, the one that tells you you're behind, too old, too late, not enough, too emotional, too much. What if that isn't wisdom? What if it's just repetition? Because repetition feels like truth, but repetition and truth are not the same. That's why two women can experience the exact same situation. One says, I made a mistake. The other says, I am the mistake. Same event, completely different in a conversation and completely different future. Because your life simply doesn't follow what happens to you, it follows the meaning you give what happens to you. That's why inner conversations matter so much because it's not just describing your life, it's quietly creating it. So, I want you to pause with me for just a minute and think about the sentence that you've been repeating to yourself lately. Maybe it's, I'll never change. I'm always messing things up. Nobody really needs me. I have to do everything myself. I don't deserve that. Now ask yourself something. If someone you love said that about themselves, what would you say to them? Would you agree or would you gently remind them of the truth? I believe you would remind them of the truth. And in that case, why does your heart deserve any less kindness than theirs? Sometimes healing doesn't begin when life changes. Sometimes healing begins when the conversation inside your own mind finally does. Now, you might be wondering, if I've been thinking this way for years, how do I actually change it? The answer isn't pretending every thought is positive. I'm going to show you a simple exercise that can completely change the way you respond to your inner voice without forcing fake positivity. And it's something that you can start today. Here's where I think a lot of personal development gets it wrong. People will tell you just think positive, speak affirmations, replace every negative thought with a positive one. Now, don't get me wrong. I believe in affirmations and I believe our words have power. But if you spend 30 or 40 years believing something about yourself, you're probably not going to wake up tomorrow, say one affirmation, and suddenly believe the opposite. Let's be realistic. Real transformation doesn't happen because you force yourself to think differently. It happens because you begin noticing your thoughts before they become your reality. And there's a big difference. See, awareness always comes before change. So you can't change your conversation you don't realize you're having. That's why step 3 of the Life Purpose Makeover isn't called positive thinking. It's called my inner conversation because conversations can change. And unlike a speech, a conversation allows questions, right? So instead of immediately believing every thought that enters your mind, I want you to start interviewing it. When your mind says you're going to fail, ask, what evidence do I actually have for that? When it says you're being selfish, ask, am I being selfish or am I honoring a need? When it says you're too late, ask, according to who? Do you see what's happening? You're no longer letting your thoughts lead you. You're leading the conversation. And friend, that is a powerful shift. Because for years, many of us have lived as if every thought deserved our agreement. But thoughts are not commands. Thoughts are not facts. Thoughts are invitations. And you get to decide which invitations you accept. I want to give you something practical this week. It's simple, but don't mistake simple for insignificance. For the next 7 days, carry a notebook or use your notes app on your phone. Every time you notice yourself saying something unkind about yourself, write it down. Don't judge it. Don't fix it. Just notice it. Then beside it, answer 3 questions. The first question is this thought completely true or does it just feel familiar? Question 2, where did I learn this? When did I first learn this? You may not know the answer every time, and that's okay. The goal isn't perfection. The goal is awareness. Nobody's going to come and grade what you write in your notebook or your notes. And question 3, if somebody I deeply love said this about themselves, how would I respond? Now, write the response underneath of that, not as an affirmation, as compassion. Because here's what I've learned most women know how to encourage everyone else. They've just never learned how to offer the same grace to themselves. Can I be honest with you? There was a season in my own life when I thought I had a confidence problem. I thought that if I could just become more confident, everything would fall into place. But confidence wasn't really the issue. The conversation I was having with myself was. I could accomplish something and immediately tell myself, that's not enough. I could receive a compliment and instantly explain it away. I could make progress and somehow convince myself I was still behind. Nothing outside of me could ever become loud enough to overpower what was happening inside of me. And one day I realized something. I was waiting for my life to give me permission to believe in myself. When what really needed to happen was for me to stop arguing with every good thing that was already true about me. That doesn't mean I became perfect overnight. I still have moments that old voice shows up or tries to show up. The difference now, I recognize it. And because I recognize it, I don't automatically believe it. That awareness has changed far more than any motivational quote ever could. Maybe that's the invitation for you today, not to silence every critical thought, but to stop giving every critical thought the final word. Because once your inner conversation begins to change, something surprising happens. The choices you make start changing too. And that's where the whole journey begins to come together. Let's talk about what that looks like in everyday life. Here's what I want you to notice. Nothing changed in those examples except the conversation. The opportunity was still the same. The relationship was still the same. The challenge was still the same. The what was the same. The only thing that changed was the story that she believed about herself. And that story changed what she chose to do next. That's why your inner conversation is quietly creating your future. Not because your thoughts magically make things happen, but because your thoughts influence your choices and your choices shape your life. Let me show you what I mean. Imagine two women are offered the exact same opportunity. Maybe it's applying for a promotion, starting a business, going to school, or simply taking one afternoon for themselves without feeling guilty. The first woman hears the thought, I'm probably not ready. She believes it. She never applies. She never starts. She never acts. She stays exactly where she was. The second woman hears the exact same thought, but instead of believing it immediately, she pauses. She says, maybe I'm not fully ready, but I've grown enough to take the next step. Same thought, different response, different choice, different future. Do you see why this matters? Your future isn't determined by the first thought that enters your mind. It's influenced by the thought process you choose to agree with. That is incredibly empowering because you can't always control the thought that shows up, but you can learn to choose which one gets permission to stay. I want to leave you with today's Keisha principle because I hope it becomes something you carry with you this week. You'll never consistently treat yourself better than you talk to yourself. Read that again. Well, listen to that again. You'll never consistently treat yourself better than you talk to yourself. If your inner conversation says, I don't matter, your choices will eventually reflect it. If your inner conversation says everyone else comes first, your calendar will eventually reflect it. If your inner conversation says, I am not enough, your opportunities will eventually reflect it. But the beautiful thing is this, the opposite is true too. When your inner conversation begins to sound like compassion, your choices begin to reflect compassion. When your inner conversation begins to sound like grace, your life begins to make room for grace. When your inner conversation begins to sound like truth, you stop building your life around lies. That doesn't happen overnight. It happens one conversation at a time, one thought at a time, one intentional choice at a time. And before you know it, you're becoming someone you barely recognize. Not because you became someone else, but because you're finally becoming yourself. So, before we end today, I want you to think about one question. What sentence have you been repeating about yourself that you're finally ready to stop believing? Don't try to fix your entire inner conversation today. Just choose one sentence. One. Maybe it's, I'm not enough. Maybe it's, I'll always be this way. Maybe it's, I have to earn rest. Maybe it's, everyone else matters more than I do. Whatever it is, notice it, question it, and then replace it. Not with a fantasy, but with something that is both truthful and compassionate. Because that's where real transformation begins. Not with pretending, not with perfection, but with awareness. Remember where we started this journey. In episode 1, we discovered that you can prioritize someone you've forgotten. Episode 2, we realized that our needs aren't conveniences, they're valuable information. Today, we've uncovered something just as important. The voice in your head has been shaping the life that you're living. And here's the good news, conversations can change, which means your future can too. If today's conversation helped you realize, helped you recognize something about yourself, I love to hear from you. Leave a comment below and finish the sentence. One thought I'm choosing this week is, you don't have to have all the answers. Sometimes awareness is the biggest step forward. And if you're ready to go even deeper, I've created a free resource called the Core Values Finder, which is linked in the description. Because once you begin changing the conversation in your mind, the next question becomes, what truth do I actually want to build my life around? And that's exactly what the core values finder will help you discover. If you haven't watched the first two videos in this series, what are you waiting for? I want you to watch those next because each episode builds on the one before it. And together, they're designed to help you to stop putting yourself last and start becoming the one that you're created to be. Until next time, remember, you don't have to believe every thought you think, but you do get to choose which thoughts become the foundation of the life you're building. I'll see you in the next video.